Hello, welcome to the conversation. I have Art is Right with me here today. We're going to be talking all about color and monitors and specifically going deep into the studio display XDR. Art, why don't you start off and kind of let everybody know who you are, kind of your history a little bit, and how you got into this space?
So my background, well, I'm art, obviously. I figure more than the displays and everything, I'll tell you about the things I love. So I like sushi, espresso, and whiskeys. Scott whiskey. So I figured that would be a good, different intro. But where I
Nice.
am is I'm a photographer, and I've just been, I have a former background as a computer engineer. So I've been doing a lot of color testing and everything. And throughout the years, I work with all these color calibration companies. For example, X-Rite and one of their ambassadors there, Calibrite, which is another major company. And then throughout all those relationships, I have linked up with BenQ, and I was their ambassador for about a decade. I'm no longer their ambassador now, but this is what cements me as a color expert, because not only do I practice all this thing, but I actually use it in my practical applications, in photos and videos I edit on YouTube for the work that I do for my clients and everything, including printing through various inkjet printers and through labs as well. So it's a pretty vast network and connection that I have built up, and also the skill sets.
Nice. So we're probably going to talk about a lot of different monitors and a lot of different displays today, but I want to kind of start off with the Studio Display XDR. I just got my hands on one last week. You've had yours for a few weeks now. You have several videos on your channel about it, covering like various like minute aspects of it. You got a big review. You're talking about the matte display, the nano-texture
Yep.
display on there, how to set up color profiles on it. So in your review, you said that it was one of the best, if not the best, 5K displays on the market today. So if you had to like boil it down to like two or three points, the things that you think really stand out about this display that makes it one of the best, what would you say those things are?
I think that with every single display manufacturers out there, when you take a look at the product they release, there's always a compromise somewhere. And the way how I've been doing display review for over 10 years now. I've been obviously using much longer than that. We all have been using much longer than that, but going in depth into all these color management thing and color aspect of display for over 10 years now. And the best way for me to put it is also I'm a Star Trek geek, a Star Trek fan. So I would say display is like USS Kobayashi Maru. There's no win all
Uh-huh.
scenarios. You're not going to get the best out of everything. And I feel that out of the set of compromises that every manufacturer is given, Apple tends, I genuinely believe that Studio Display XDR compromised the least amount in most of the areas. Meaning that you
Okay.
have the 5K resolution, which many manufacturers now have, but what they have done is bump this up to 120 hertz. There's really nothing like that out there. Maybe one or two, if I'm mistaken or something like that. But if anything, there's maybe one or two. But again, you don't have anything that's 5K, 27-inch that also happens to have mini LED backlight that can go up to 2000 nits. And furthermore than that, you don't also have anything that has all those combination features so far that can also do Adobe RGB. Because if you're a designer, if you're a photographer, if you do any type of printing, you want Adobe RGB because that's a
Hmm.
color gamut that's really designed for CMYK, for inkjet printing and everything, so that you can see the best color correlation that way. And I feel like Apple has really given us this time around like the pinnacle of like displays that they have to offer, and they prove again that yeah, at some point they were like okay, but now they're really proving that they're one of the best out there. And
Yeah,
also
and
the
Adobe
calibration
RGB,
features.
yeah, that color range was not on their past Pro XDR display that they released a few years ago, was it?
None. It wasn't on Apple Display probably since the Cinema Display back in like the early 2000s, the
Oh
aluminum
wow.
chassis one. Because in about like early 2010, somewhere around that time frame, probably not getting a year correctly, but Apple came up with Display P3 color gamut. Because they manufacture so many displays, rather than conforming everything to a print standard, they want to conform it to a display standard. So that's what they came up with. So P3 is not something that, a color consortium came up with. It's something that came up from Apple. And now all the display companies are adopting that color gamut as a standard for display. So that makes some compromises, meaning that there are certain areas where P3 would show more colors than, like Adobe RGB and so forth. So they're not overlapping 100% completely. They're about like 80% overlap or so.
Interesting. That I'm going to save this question for later, but a little bit of foreshadowing. They're doing it again, aren't they? Kind of setting their own color. I don't know what to call it. Kind of doing the thing like they did with P3, but they're doing it again with this monitor with some other stuff that they're doing with color.
Yep, yep.
The other thing I wanted to kind of go over is, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here.
It's okay.
A lot of people on my channel are familiar with like basically LED displays, like one backlight kind of
Hmm.
lighting up the display, and a lot of people understand that as shorthand for the lowest end displays tend to be LED, and then at least in my space, a lot of people see OLED as like the top of the line because you're talking about like being able to turn off pixels individually and so you can get those deeper blacks, and when you have those bright whites they can get super bright, and mini LED kind of falls in the middle there from what I understand. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of give us an overview of those three technologies and why they're different, and also maybe we can then kind of jump into like why Apple chose mini LED as opposed to OLED or just a standard LED panel for this display.
So between all of those, you've kind of done a really great job covering it so far. So traditionally, what we have in general are LEDs, either just one at the top or one at the top, one at the bottom is just an LED bar, and there's a diffusion panel behind your LCD screen. There are multiple different layers, but that diffusion panel is what's taking the light and bringing those LED light throughout the entire LCD panel. The downside to that is a lot of times we have light leak, meaning that that diffusion panel is not distributing light evenly. Some areas of the screen are brighter, some are slightly darker, and that's the issue of that comes down to uniformity. And a lot of display manufacturers will do the calibration at the factory and they try to correct for each different zones to correct those. They can only do so much because there's just a single piece of diffusion layer. So that's the traditional one. Moving on to the mini LEDs. So mini LED kind of has to do with how many zones you have. On the Studio Display XDR, there are 2,304 zones, which is actually really amazing. Now, the thing is that because you're in the zone, if you really divide the display up, that means that rather than individual pixels turning on and off, you're still going to have like a group of pixels that are turning on and off. So you're not really quite getting the thing where it's going like true blacks and everything. And one of the kind of the downside of mini LED is what they call blooming, meaning that if you're viewing something on a total black background, you have something totally white show up, you will see some blooming around. And it does happen on the Studio Display XDR, but it's super minimal. And the best way, how I said in my review, to test that out is to plug in a Mac, do a restart on it, you'll see it clearly. Like it's there, but I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
it's
that
that
Apple
big of a deal,
logo.
like the big white Apple logo on the black background. But it's not too bad. They've done a really great job controlling it, even compared to the Pro Display XDR. That's the 32-inch 6K model that's like costing $5,000 without the stand, right? So Apple have done a really great job with the timing controller, with doing all these things. And then when we have another technology, that's the OLED. The thing with OLED is that there are some OLEDs right now in the market that can go to like super bright. But for instance, like even in their iPad, they have to come up with a different OLED technology. I think you may have heard the term tandem OLED.
Yep.
And that's because OLED by itself, like sometimes you cannot bring the brightness of the white like up too high. So what they do is they actually kind of layer like two OLEDs together to double the power output in a way. And this is super like bringing us down to like super layman term. You're not trying to get into too technical. So if I do miss something, I do apologize for that. But essentially
No,
that's what
you're
they do.
good.
So part of OLED that becomes an issue. Yes, you do get the true blacks, but to get the really bright, like that super HDR on the OLED when it comes to monitors, those are not easy to come by, and they require like different technologies such as tandem OLED and so forth. And I feel that in the next few years, we're probably gonna get OLED technology where it's going to be there. I don't think it's quite there just yet, and especially if you think about like for a 27-inch or 32-inch super high resolution, it's it takes a lot for the manufacturers, for the fabricators to really fab those panels, to really get like a good yield on those and everything. So I really feel like it's coming, but it's not there yet. It's everything. I think it has to do with like technology and the maturity date of that technology. And we're getting there with OLED. We're not quite there yet. And mini LED, I think Apple chooses this because it is the best compromise at this point in time. without actually bringing the
Gotcha.
price up too high and giving the user the performance that they still need on the back end, when they're doing their creative work.
Yeah. I've been, I am fascinated kind of diving into this world of looking at creative monitors. And like I'm used to drawing tablets, and
Hmm.
drawing tablets are kind of stepping in that direction. In fact, I have one right in front of me. You can't see it, but it's a nice big 27-inch XP pen display that just came out a few weeks ago. And I look at it, and the colors are beautiful, and it's amazing, but it's just an LED panel, right? It's just a
Hmm.
standard LED
Yep.
panel. And what I've noticed in kind of the creative industry, this is an area where people have not jumped over to OLED. Whereas if you look at gaming, if you look at TVs, if you look at some of these other spaces, more like the consumer end of things, it seems like those companies are jumping on OLED a lot faster. And I'm wondering if there's some like technical benefit to sticking with LED or even mini LED right now that maybe like that maybe like a consumer doesn't need that like some kind of benefit there that a creative does, or is it just price and the maturity of the technology?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think it's all of what you said. So I think it's the
Okay.
price, it's the maturity of technology we talked about. Price would be another factor that comes in because if you take a look at like an OLED 5K 27-inch right now, price start to go up fairly high, right? Even with non-Apple displays. So that's the first thing. The other thing too is that when you really think about creative display, there are certain aspect of it that requires more attention. I mean, the color accuracy part comes in and play a big role, uniformity, all those kind of things where in the consumer space, in gaming, you don't really care so much about like, oh, it has to be super color accurate. It can just be tuned up so that you bring the saturation up so the game pops out the screen so that whatever you're viewing on TV looks really great. And that's easy to do it that way. But to get colors that are precise within like the reference color gamut, that's difficult. And I think that's the one of the main reasons why a lot of manufacturers haven't gone there yet, meaning that they can manufacture those at scale, but they don't have to worry about too much of the precision. And when it comes to like precision for a creative workflow, I think that's part of the reason why we're just starting to see them coming out right now, but it's not really fully out there yet. And it has to do with that element of precision, I think, more so than even pricing and everything else.
Gotcha. The other spec that we don't see a lot in the creative industry quite as much that we are seeing in the XDR that you mentioned before is this is Apple's first 120 hertz monitor.
Hmm.
And in other spaces, Android tablets especially,
Hmm.
120 hertz is like table stakes to put an Android tablet out there nowadays.
Yeah.
Even in like the high end iPads, we're seeing 120 hertz. Um, and I think it's interesting that like in a lot of drawing tablets, in a lot of creative displays, I have an Asus 5K behind me. That's still only 60 hertz. Why do you think that the creative industry has kind of lagged behind as far as refresh rate? Is it kind of for the same reason as OLED of price and performance, or is it something that the users don't maybe care quite as much about in that industry?
I hate to say this, but I'm going to call out the companies out there by saying lack of
Yeah.
imagination from their product managers.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times, like I've been privy enough to work with a few companies, consult with a few companies, and I understand what have gone on in the boardroom or in their meetings when they're planning products. And a lot of times it comes down to, oh, creator doesn't need this, and it's good to have. It doesn't, I always think of display as one of those things where it's like every company needs a unicorn product. You need something that the user wants to aspire to. They want to aspire to own that. They want to own that because once they feel that they own that, right, they have reached the top of their creative career, and that's what I want. And a lot of times, what we see with a lot of third-party manufacturers are displayed are just kind of just all the same, same panel
Yeah.
fab, just slightly different software, nothing exciting. I think I personally, I think they mistaken it and they read the market wrong. That would be one thing. The other thing too is where high refresh rate come in is when you use like a drawing tablet, especially with what you're doing, right? Having the response come up on the screen like a double the rate that you would normally get with a 60 hertz, that makes a big difference. You can see more instantaneously what you're drawing, where you're making those adjustments and so forth. I think that's a really great benefit. Now, a few comments I got on my review video was that, it's 120 hertz, but I'm not really seeing it as much, like not as noticeable as on my iPhone or iPad. And it's like, why is that? Well,
Yes.
It's because your field of view is that much bigger, right? And I think a lot of times like refresh rate has to do with the field of view as well because everything becomes relative at that point in time. Like it's 120, it's great. But if you're focusing on that little area where you're drawing right there, where supposedly your ink, it's not really ink anymore, but where your
Yeah.
pixels are getting drawn by the pen, you're gonna notice it becoming faster. But if you're looking at the overall window as you're scaling up and down or doing something, you're not gonna see it as much. But I think that's a lot of
Yeah.
what it really comes down to. And again, when possible, Apple tries to really push the engineering technology. And watch, there'll be a whole bunch of copycatters out there. But we need somebody like that in the industry.
To kind of push it.
Hmm.
The other thing that like has really blown me away about both the Studio Display and the XDR is just the build quality. And I am a
Oh
sucker
yeah,
for build quality.
yep.
And this is an area I guess I think tech reviewers have done a pretty good job of covering it. Like the stand is really cool, but whenever they mention the stand, they're like, "Oh, it's $400," which I get. Like it is purely like this is a solved problem. There are other stands that do this for basically free, you know.
Yep.
But oh my goodness, like I using other monitors. So I use the displays for a week, and then yesterday I just started unboxing the other displays, and I my first thought was, ew. And I'm like, I'm
Uh-huh.
unboxing a $1,000 display, and I'm
Uh-huh.
saying, ew. And it has nothing to do with the screen or the colors or what the display itself does. It has everything to do with the build quality because it's so hard to go from like this beautiful aluminum thing. And I love what you said before because you were talking about like this aspirational thing. Like as a creator, you
Yep.
kind of get to this place in your career and you're like, when I have that,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing I want. When
Yep.
when I was a young web designer just starting out, it was a MacBook Pro. Like I wanted the all aluminum MacBook Pro. Like once I had a MacBook Pro and I didn't have a desktop computer, then I had made it. And
Yep.
that's how this monitor feels. Both of the studio displays feel that way as it's almost like a fashion accessory.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to say, but
Yeah.
there's something to that, especially for people who are really into aesthetics,
Mm-hmm.
designers, illustrators, photographers. That's a big deal.
Yeah. The easiest
Yeah.
way to put it is that once you get one of those, you have arrived.
Yes. And I it kind of makes me feel better about the standard studio display because putting them next to each other, I don't need perfect color. I need color to be consistent. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
what I care about the most. And kind of the thing that's kind of blown me away about just testing these is when I go from my Mac screen to either of those displays, if I look closely, I can definitely see the
Mm-hmm.
differences. Like the blues of the standard Mac background just pop more on that
Mm-hmm.
XDR. The gray, the mountain range in the background fades to gray on the standard display, but you see more of the blues and the
Yep. Yep.
midtones
Yep.
kind of pull out. So you can see it, but when you're not paying attention to the detail, just putting them next to each other or putting them next to a MacBook screen, like the colors are really consistent between them. And that's super helpful because I think everybody's had that experience where you plug your laptop into a display and you're like, oh no, something,
Yeah.
either my
Yeah.
laptop screen is terrible or this display is not calibrated properly.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I see that a lot.
Apple have done a really good job tweaking their displays from each different lineup. Yeah, there are variations, but interestingly enough, there is the CMF 2026, which is the new calibration standard that they come up with. And interesting enough, one of my friend who is a color scientist also worked on the consortium on helping develop that too. It's kind of like very interesting, like just talking to my friend, like
Huh.
I was super excited. He's like, oh yeah, it's just something that I work on. I'm like, dude, this is so awesome. So yeah, so that's another thing they're doing on the Studio Display XDR that hasn't permeated, at least from my understanding anyway, to any of the other displays in Apple lineup yet. But the moment they do that, you're going to get a much better color consistency throughout the products that are in Apple range right now, and hopefully other third-party manufacturer display too, because it is a standard that's being picked up by the CIE, the Commission on Luminance. So it is one of the newer standard that's hopefully it will be coming to other displays really soon. I have no insight knowledge,
Interesting.
but one can really hope.
I know Apple said that they, like I had read in one of their press releases, that they said they're working with standards bodies to kind of bring it in. And
Hmm.
whenever I hear that, I'm always kind of like, I wonder if this will go anywhere or anything. So it sounds like it's already kind of gaining ground and like people are looking at this. This is probably a good time to really dive deep into color spaces and that sort of thing. And then we could kind of come back
Let's do
around to
it.
that. So, okay, I have to read this, and I'm going
It's
to
okay.
have you explain it to me like I'm five.
It's okay.
So, basically, in these notes I read, this is talking about the XDR. The display is calibrated to a new color matching function. We're talking
Yep.
about Apple CMF 2026,
Yep.
designed to improve visual consistency across Apple devices displays. To accurately measure the Studio XDR, measurement instruments must support and be set to the calibration space as its preset. So I guess I would start with my question that I literally wrote in my
Go.
notes is, what the
Please go.
heck is Apple CMS 2026? So you just answered that. Like, this is a new standard that they're working on. And I guess we should kind of jump back. What are some of the current standards and where did they come from?
So interestingly enough, this goes back to like a history lesson a little bit. Back in about like
Hmm.
1931, there's a group of people in France that came together, and what they decided to do is we want to define the color standard. We want to define all the colors that we human can see. So there's this big chunk and block of color, and this color gamut is actually called CIE 1931. CIE stands for, I'm going to butcher my French here, so again, I apologize for that. It's Commission Internationale de Éclairage, which is the Commission on Luminance that I talk about. So it is a standardized body. It's been around for close to 100 years now, and they define the colors. So every single color gamut that we know about, Adobe RGB, P3 color gamut, you name it, Rec 709, sRGB, and so forth, all fit within that, large cube blocks of color. It's like
Okay.
carving that out to represent those color gamut that can be shown on separate devices on display and so forth. But what happens is when you need to do the translation, in layman terms, like let's say you need to translate Adobe RGB into the P3 gamut to go over like the overlapping parts and everything. The way how that is done is you go back to that big color cube and you use that to translate the value in a way. So that big color
Hmm.
cube is kind of like the one that's been using to do display calibration all this time. The problem using the 1931 technology is that back then TV were still black and white. We don't have
Yeah.
LCD screens at all. So we're using old technology that we constantly been adapting for, close to 100 years now to define modern day's display. And Apple just engineers, just overly ambitious engineers, I would say at times. But look at it and like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense because the classic example would be, for example, my iPhone here has a OLED display, and my 16-inch MacBook Pro has a mini LED, and you compare pictures side by side, they're close enough together, but sometimes there are minor variations, right? And what CMF 2026 is designed to do is at the when they're doing the calibration at factory is supposed to minimize all those differences, and the color differences that we see from these from the different backlight, the term we use in like the color industry is called metamerism. Essentially it's just this thing where it's like the colors, even though they're defined the same, but the backlight is different, the light source that you use to illuminate is different, is causing you to see different colors. That's what it is, and CMF is designed specifically to eliminate that as much as possible so that in the future, when we see two different backlight technologies, and especially if we gone in and calibrate them, you're not going to see that variation as much anymore. You'll be like, oh, this is like matching. Because this is a classic problem that all of us have, especially anybody who calibrate display. You calibrate two of them that are just slightly different brand, different models and so forth, and they're kind of off. They're both showing really good values. They pass the calibration, but they're off, and you're wondering, what the heck, right?
Yep.
And this is
Yep.
going to eliminate a lot of those issues that are coming up.
Okay. That's
But
cool to know.
when this becomes a standard, and this also goes into like not just only factory calibration, but also our calibration software has to adapt to this new standard. It's
Yes.
going to be a while, but it's
You,
a good forward-looking future.
yeah. So in your video, in your review, you pulled out, I think it was a Kalman color calibrator, like one of those little calibrators. And if people at home don't know what those are, basically they go on your screen and then your screen you load up some software and your screen goes through this process where it flashes different colors. And the calibrator is basically sitting on your screen and it's trying to detect what colors coming into the lens,
Yep.
and then it's, I guess, calibrating the color. It's trying to match. It's saying, okay, this monitor, when I told it to give me pure green, is giving me this. I'm expecting to see that, so I'm going to darken that maybe or lighten that up, and it's
Yep.
going to do that, and it's going to then give you profiles based on what your monitor actually gave you when you put that calibrator on it. Does that sound like I described it properly?
You've got
It's
a lot
probably
of really
very
great points.
simplified.
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
it's really simplified. I appreciate that, and you got a lot of points correct. So I'm going to refine your answer a little bit more, not necessarily correcting you because
Okay.
you got a lot of great ideas there, and that they're absolutely correct. So the first thing is that when we put these devices, this is a Calibrate display plus HDR. These are compatible with Apple Pro displays that I've gone over in my review. When you use these devices to run the calibration on the Apple display one where the colors are flashing, essentially those colors are known values. Those are like reference values that they're flashing.
Okay.
And they, the software that in this case will be Apple built-in macOS software Pro Display Calibrator knows exactly what values that's supposed to be. So when it's not, it's doing the adjustment on the back end to bring it up to the exact value or as close as possible. So that the way how
Okay.
you described that's perfect. The only difference though was be at the end. The process you're describing about the ICC profile, that's the way how we have been doing for third-party displays. This is something that Apple have gone away altogether. They hide that. In fact, they hide the
Yeah.
entire ICC thing. And it makes sense because when you can do the Pro Display calibration and use the preset mode and just do the fine-tune calibration thing, you're getting really great accurate colors without using an extra set of file, that ICC profile, to really go and control the color output. So they bypass those altogether, yet still giving you great color. And it's gonna give like some people in the color community a little bit of like, anxiety for a little bit, just because I'm like, oh, I don't know how to live my life without ICC profile for displays. But if you really take a look at it, and I've done a lot of independent verification on the Delta E's and everything like that for the display. And once I've gone through the entire process, I mean, we're able to get Delta E under 2. And the moment we can get that value under 2, we're good. And by the way, I wanted to share with your viewers, like if you're unfamiliar with Delta E, that is the
Yeah.
value that describe how color accurate your display is, how much off it is from like the reference value, whatever color gamut
And
you choose.
anything under two is
It,
pretty accurate.
yeah,
Yeah.
anything under 2 is
I learned that
almost.
from you, so I'm kind of repeating your stuff.
Oh no, you're great. You're great. So anything under 2 is like imperceptible to normal human vision. You might, if I pull like a delta E of 2, like put like two red color swatch side by side, you'll be able to see it if I have them next to each other. But I have it just apart on gray, on white, or on black. It will be hard for normal human vision to see that variation of 2. So that's
Okay.
the key point here is that we want that to be as low as possible. And once I've gone through this entire process on these Apple Pro displays without ICC, I'm able to get that value just slightly above 1, like 1.3, 1.5, something
Oh
like
wow.
that, depending on the color mode. They're really fantastic displays. This is the reason why I'm as ecstatic and excited as I am, because it's a new method, but they're implementing in a way that just wow, I never thought about doing it this way, and they're giving someone like me, a color geek, something to be excited about, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So I've seen monitors, some monitors, like higher end monitors, advertise that they are hardware calibrated.
Mm-hmm.
Is is that kind of what you were talking about how Apple has kind of taken away that layer of the ICC profiles? Is that what hardware calibration is, or is that something a little different?
So hardware calibration. Let me, if you don't mind, I'll give you the kind of like the 5 to 6 year old explanation, because I think that's going to be
Yeah,
best for a
yeah.
majority of us. Let's not get too technical here. Essentially, majority of displays that you've been working with your entire life, those are all software calibration only, meaning that you would use a Calibrite device like this, you would use Calibrite Profiler software, and then when in the end it will generate an ICC profile. That's a software adjustment. That's the software. It's like putting a curve on your file in Photoshop, saying that, oh, by the way, adjust the red this much, adjust the blue this much. But it's a piece of software that's changing the color output on your video card. You can only do so much. So then there comes another type display, which you mentioned. Those are hardware calibrated display. The difference on a hardware calibrated display is that the software, you have to use the proprietary software from the display manufacturers. That software talks directly with the display. In the end, it still generates an ICC profile. However, interestingly enough, that ICC profile does not manipulate colors. It just tells the video card
Okay.
output the color as is, and on the display itself there is a whole bunch of like computer. It's like a mini computer running with like a chip on there that's doing the color adjustment at the panel level. So you're not using a file like a curve adjustment. You're doing the adjustment via literally like a circuit board and a hardware. So the term that we use for that is called a 3D LUT, or an adjustable LUT, a lookup table. So essentially,
I've
when you're
heard that
adjusting,
term.
yeah, that's a lot of term used in videos, but again, it's one of those broad terms that can mean multiple things. But on the display, There's a lot on there. There's a lookup table, but those are, most of the time are locked or fixed. On a hardware calibrated display, there are a couple of like LUTs that are open that users can go in and do a custom calibration so it can be adjusted to their computer. Now, the way how Apple is implementing it is slightly different. So when you run a calibration, which is like the most, I would say I would go in with Apple Pro displays as the following: creating preset, right? Creating based on your workflow, your working environment, everything, doing a fine-tune calibration. That's like a great thing to do. I would do those two first. Calibration part, the full thing that I've showed you with the flashing colors, I would do that like every few months or so. I wouldn't do that all the time, just because again, Apple is changing the paradigm a little bit. And when you're doing those, you're not calibrating it to your computer, you're calibrating to the factory specification of that display. So rather than
Okay.
tuning it to a specific computer, like the way how hardware calibration display has been doing it, they're tuning it to the factory spec, knowing that that's going to be good. And because Apple controlled the whole stack, they know that once you plug it into your computer, you select the preset mode, if you've done the fine-tune calibration, you're going to get good colors regardless. So they curtail a lot of the steps where you're measuring like 400, 600, or 400 like 61 color patches and everything. And not that that method is not valid, but I think it's a different way of using it for a display that's not capable of doing what Apple Display can. Hopefully
Another
that
thing that kind
helped
of
answer
broke
the
my
question.
brain. No, that's good. Another thing that kind of broke my brain when I was watching your video is that everybody kind of understands that inside the XDR display, there's an A19 Pro chip.
Yep.
And I always assumed like, okay, there's like 128 gigabytes of SSD.
Yep.
It's a computer,
Yep.
basically a computer without Wi-Fi, right? And I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
there to run the speakers, that's there to run the FaceTime camera, that's there to interface with the Mac. And you brought up in your videos that like when you calibrate it, when you create that new profile is not held on your Mac, like you mentioned, like it's not a software profile. That profile is now saved to that monitor. So if you
Hmm.
plug in a different Mac, you have that profile available for that monitor. And I thought I had no idea that was a thing. Do other manufacturers do that? Like do super high end displays do that sort of thing?
Super high-end hardware calibrated display require that you bring each computer in and you run the calibration. So you would calibrate to each specific computer you're trying to use. On Apple One, you can do that, and you don't even like need to go through the full calibration with this. You only need to use this to do a fine-tuned calibration. So one of my friends actually that works for this big creative company just reached out to me after seeing the review as well. And he's like, Art, is my understanding correct? I want to get one of these and use it in a workspace with 7 to 8 people. Like, how do I do that? Do I take this and just run the full calibration on every one of my friend's computer, my colleagues? I'm like, no, don't do that. What you want to do is take your colleague computer in, plug it in, and create a preset. So, for example, if your colleague name is, let's say, John, you would just create one for like John 16-inch MacBook Pro, define like the color space you want to use, put that there, and that's already on the system. Do a fine-tune calibration with this device on John's color preset. Pull in the next person. Let's say Jennifer. Plug in Jennifer laptop and create a preset for Jennifer. So because it's Studio Display XDR, each preset can have their own fine-tuned calibration value. So you're now doing the color correction with only entering in a few values for each of those specific machine output. And
Oh
that's really
wow.
cool because, like, for example, if John Lee, if he left it on John, that's fine. When Jen plugs it in, she can just go pick up Jen and boom. If you've done the fine tune calibration, you know you're going to get the delta E less than 2. You're going to get good, accurate colors. So you can use this in a revolving office with like multiple people, using the display. And that's really awesome because a lot of hardware calibrated displays, some of them are, they have a lot of calibration slot. Many of them tend to have only like 2 or 3 calibration slot, meaning you can only calibrate to 2 or 3 machines. So you kind of need to have a machine somewhat permanently there if anybody wants to get good, accurate color throughout, where this is kind of curtailing the whole thing. So I'm
Yeah, yeah.
planning to do a video explaining that a little bit more, but I'm glad you brought up that question.
So if say so John's using the monitor and then Jen comes in with her MacBook and she plugs it into the monitor, all she has to do is go to her settings and
Uh-huh.
then choose that color profile.
Yep.
And she's good.
Yep.
Nice. That is cool.
And you can just do that for as many users you want. I don't know if there's a limit to how many you can create. So far, I made like 10 plus and it still be going just fine. I mean, if you have an office of like 200 people, you're probably not going to be sharing one displays. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That would be a sad office.
Let's see, what else is I going to talk about here? I have a whole bunch of notes here. I talked about saving things on the display. We talked about colored presets. So I want to kind of go away from the XDR for a minute because I review a lot of these displays. A few years ago,
Hmm.
kind of what started me down this path of enlightenment of sorts, a semi understanding that this world existed, I guess, is that I got a Wacom display to review, and Wacom makes some really high
Yep.
end drawing
Hmm.
tablets, and they have different tiers. They have their entry level, they have their mid tier, and then they have their high end. And at the
Yep.
high end, I mean, these things cost like $5,000, and they came, and so when they launched their high-end pro level Cintiqs maybe 3 years ago, I
Hmm.
reviewed it and I was like, whoa, this price is crazy, because I was not seeing all the color profiles and things like that they were doing with that. Do you have any familiarity with Wacom as a brand or anything, or
I
kind of how
do.
they handle color?
I think the way how
Uh,
they handle color is a little bit different. I haven't seen the way how they implement their latest like edition of colors. I have some contact in Wacom, which I do plan to reach out to them and do more of kind of rather than the display or pen display review like the way how you're doing it, more so talking about the
mm-hmm.
color aspect of it. I think that would be a good benefit to like Wacom users out there. My
Yes.
understanding is that they are implementing uh, colors through kind of like a software thing that controls on the screen, not quite like the hardware that Apple is doing or many hardware calibrated display manufacturers. And again, I could be wrong on that one. I need to look into it a little bit more, but that's the way how I think they're doing it, is that they're using their set of software to control the software on the display. So it's not unlike that of just any third-party displays out there that when you buy it, it comes with a lot of these pre-calibrated factory color modes, such as Adobe RGB, P3, sRGB, Rec 709. You can choose all those in a Wacom, but I don't think there is a way for you to go in and do a full like adjustment on those to adjust the LUT itself. And if you do a kind
Mm-hmm.
of anything with like calibration, even with their software, my understanding would be you're kind of doing the ICC like a software calibration thing, which will get you
Okay.
closer. But again, it's kind of becoming one of those relic of the past. Not really there yet. And I'm saying that kind of like it's somewhat mean to say the ICC is a relic of the past because for displays,
Yeah.
because that's still the predominant mode, the way how we've been working with color accurate displays. But with the way how Apple's doing it, it's just, I don't know. I'm still astonished by what they have done. Let me simply put it
That's
that
so
way.
cool. I think it'd be crazy, crazy valuable to get a video like that. I know I was one of the first reviews out of the gate, and one of the problems with being one of the first out of the gate is that the thing you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
And I know after that review went up, I talked to them, and they were so proud of what they had done with color calibration and all that fun stuff. And it was just like, whoo, right over my head. And I felt awful about it. I was like, man, I wish I had like a mulligan on it, but also at the same time, I didn't have all the knowledge I needed to really kind of deep dive and sink my teeth into that.
Hmm.
And I think there's been a couple of like photographers who have since touched some of those displays and have like a broader understanding of that. But to do like a hardcore deep dive into one of those products, I think for the community at large would be really useful, because there are some people, like if you're working in the film industry or
Hmm.
if you're working in like one of those studios where that is the selling point of using a Wacom over, say, like a third party like this
Yeah.
XP pen that I'm sitting in front of.
Yep.
Like that's the benefit, but none of us reviewers understand the value of that benefit, so we can't review the main thing, the main selling point of the monitor. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would, like, if you need a contact at Wacom, I could hook you up.
That
I
would be
want that
fantastic.
video.
I would love that. Yeah. So I
Okay,
have one.
I'm
Let's
gonna make it
verify
happen.
if I have the same person or not. But yeah, please hook me up.
Okay, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to jump into is you did an entire video on the nano coating of the screen,
Hmm.
and I don't have the nano coated one. Because that's a how many? It's like a $300 option, I think, to get the
Yeah,
nano
I think
coating on
it's
that
300.
display.
I
So,
think it's 150 or 100.
or maybe it was
I
on the
don't remember
iPad. It's a
exactly.
hundred dollars.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know on the MacBook Pro it's like 150, I believe, but I think on the big one, I
yeah.
haven't, honestly, I haven't paid attention that much. Maybe $200, but it's over 100 for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's not cheap, and and Yeah, so I've seen it on like my M5 MacBook has the nano texture display.
Hmm.
I used a nano textured iPad.
Hmm.
One of the things that is great for drawing, and every drawing tablet comes with a matte screen on
Yep,
it,
yep.
and one of the main reasons is just because it feels so much better to draw on a screen
Hmm.
with just a little bit of tooth to it than it does
Yep,
on a screen
yep,
that's like glossy and slippery.
yep.
But as I'm kind of getting into this world, I'm realizing there's more like the BenQ that I have. That's a matte screen, and that's not meant for drawing. The Asus I have, that's a matte screen. It's not meant for drawing.
Hmm.
Which question should I ask first? Let me back up. I'll go back to my matte screen question in a second. Let's just stick with
No
the edge
worries.
glass nano coating.
Yep.
How is that nano coating different than what we see on most other monitors when they're doing kind of that matte surface?
So interestingly enough, all the other display manufacturers, they just coat their screen. They use like a matte coating thing that has that matte look that doesn't reflect the light. The way how Apple have done is very different. They coat the glass. They still coat the glass, but what they have done is actually etch the glass itself. So there is a micro texture on that glass that comes from etching that piece of glass to cause the texture to be uneven. That's the main difference between what Apple is doing versus what other manufacturers doing. What you get to see in the back end looks almost very non-distinguishable until you look it up closer, meaning that a nano-texture etching glass would still reflect because it's still glass. It's not a coating that runs on top of it. So there's still some. I don't think reflection is the good word there. It's a lot more reflective than the coating from other third-party display manufacturers where it diffuse everything completely because you're still etching a piece of glass. So like I said, reflection is not the right word, but you can still see some of that glass attributes and aspect still shining, or still coming through a little bit. So I would put it that way. So Apple process, like I said, it's very different. That's why they're charging extra for it, because this is something that they have to do extra, because this glass is either sandblasted or laser etched or something like that. I'm not even sure what the process is, but it's gone through a separate treatment process altogether. And I can tell you right now too that the nano texture is also coated at the very same time, because in my review I showed that the Studio Display XDR, the coating's a little bit more kind of like green in a way, and the laptop one on the M5 MacBook Pro, M5 Max, the one I have, is a lot more kind of like blue purple. So you kind of see somewhat of like a different coating being used on those glass, but nonetheless it is a treated piece of glass.
Very cool. Every so often in tech, when you get a new piece of tech, you've probably felt this. Actually, you may have felt this when you got the XDR display.
Hmm.
But like you get something new and it's genuinely new. Like
Yeah,
you just see it and
yeah.
you're like, oh, I get it. And one of those moments for me was when the M4 iPad Pro came out and
Hmm.
they first had that dual OLED and also had the nano texture
Yep, yep,
glass on
yep.
it. And when I first used it, I was like, this is cool. And it's actually not as grippy as a lot of matte textured surfaces. So using like the Apple Pencil with it didn't give me as much grip as I expected. It's actually a really smooth like
Yep.
experience for a matte display. And but I took it outside because now I'm like, okay, now I'm in
Uh-huh.
the part of the review where I talk about this dual OLED in the sun. And I have like a big backyard with no shade. My dog loves it. He can run around, but it's not a great work environment. So we have like an umbrella set up. But usually when I film, I set up the table and I have the umbrella out and I could film things outside and show it there. But if I take it out from underneath the umbrella, I think it came out like May or June of that year. So it was summertime by then. It was really sunny. And I took it out from behind the umbrella and I walked out onto the deck and I looked at it and I was like, I can see this display
Hmm.
perfectly clearly. And it kind of blew my mind. Like the dual OLED mixed with that
Yeah.
texture just was like, I get it. This is magic because you look at
Yep.
any phone in the sun and you kind of have to angle it. You had, you know, like even
Uh-huh.
an OLED screen, you could get it bright enough to do it. But this was that moment where it was like, wow, you match that texture with that dual OLED and it like, it's a screen outside. I didn't know we could make these things, you know, in the sun. It was wild. It was like magic. And it was hard to describe that to people. Like, no, no. And I was like, I will never use this outside. But if you do, this is actually a cool option.
Yeah. It is one of those things where I was trying to film it, was just like, how do I convey this to people and have them see it? And I really think I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna add one point. I think the standard glass versus the nano texture or the matte screen has become such a polarizing topic in the creative industry where it's like, oh no,
Yeah.
this is not this, or it's less saturation. I mean, here's the thing. This is what I tell people all the time. Like, you do you. You choose what's best for your workflow. If you prefer the glossy one, that's fine. Just get the glossy one. There's nothing wrong with that. But now we have the option. Like for myself, I would get everything that I have in matte display now, like the nano texture one from Apple, because I love
Hmm.
that much better. I love the fact that I'm looking at my laptop screen right now. I don't see a reflection of myself at the moment. Like when I look down, I
Uh-huh.
can't get that with the standard glass. I would see me, and I could be in a dark environment and I would still see an outline of me. And I love not seeing
Yeah.
me in the display.
That actually leads me into kind of like what my secondary question is
Hmm.
around these displays, because so many creative displays, even outside the drawing area, have this matte texture. And
Hmm.
like you get into any other display, well, I shouldn't say any other display. The only other area I know about is gaming, because it's usually, not always, with
Hmm.
a lot of tech, if it works well for gaming, it's going to work really well in the creative area, so you're like, there's just
Yeah.
a ton of overlap. And
Yep.
it's always funny when these computer companies like separate out their divisions and you're talking to them and I'm like, I want to try this laptop. And they're like, that's got RGB, it's for gamers. And I'm like, but it can render in Blender. Like, what do you like? It's got the
Yeah. Yeah.
GPU. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
we got this. Always cracks me up. But this is something that, like, when they differentiate their lines of monitors, like I see Matt uh, that matte display often on like creative monitors, but not necessarily on other consumer monitors. Is it that you just don't want to see your reflection, that people think that, like, what are the pros and cons? Why do some people like the glossy and some people like the matte when they're kind of doing photography work or that sort of thing?
Interestingly enough, I'm gonna go back and blame Apple from about like 2008, circa. That's when they came up with a glossy display on their laptop, and they made that solely inch on that and made that the standard for the past over like a decade. And people gotten so used to it. You have new creators coming in that just sees all these glossy displays, never thinking about reflection and everything. For someone like me, who's been doing this over 20 years, we've seen what have come before. We've seen the matte display that comes as a standard, and we're like, oh yeah, we like that much better, right? So that's why I think the polarizing thing happened, where so much of the people are now used to their phone and everything being glossy, and they think like, oh, it's more saturated colors, the contrast is better. I'm like, true, but in a way, like, it's not that a matted or a nano texture etching display is lying to you. It's just telling you exactly like how your work could be looking on the lowest common denominator. So what that's telling you is
Mm-hmm.
that if you can edit your picture and make it pop on a nano texture on a matte display, take that to any glossy display out there, your picture is going to look fantastic. The problem with glossy display, I find in general for creative workflow, is that it tends to lie to us. Flattering tends to be the term that I like to use on that. And it makes your picture and your edit look flattering. So a lot of times, from my perspective as a photographer, I see people work all the time. And what do? They take it about 60%, 70% of the way there because it looks great on their display. And then they just stop editing because they're like, this looks fantastic. Take that onto the
Mm-hmm.
matte display, it looks dull. It doesn't pop up at all. Try to print that, it doesn't look good. So, that there's that element of it too, where I prefer to look at a work on a matte display because I know that I'm looking at, the lowest common denominator out there. And that's maybe not the best term to use, but um,
Mm-hmm.
it really describes that if you can get something to look good on there, you're going to be fine everywhere else. Where on a glossy display, it's not the same thing. It
Mm-hmm.
has a tendency to lie to you with that extra contrast or that extra saturation. So it doesn't, what do you call it, encourage to push yourself to push your edit as far as you would on a matte display. So that's how I would put
My
it.
background, yeah, my background is as a web designer. Like that's what I was before I started making content. And
Hmm.
so we we looked at it. We kind of had a similar philosophy, but it was slightly different incentives, which was like one of the things you do in like interface design all the time is
Hmm.
like the important elements need a ton of contrast. Like so,
Oh yeah.
black text on a white background, you're good to go. Like if it gets too gray, people aren't going to see it, or they're just not going to notice it. Or
Hmm.
like that's where you hide the fine print if you don't want people to read what you're actually doing with your service, like that sort
Yep.
of thing.
Yep.
But like if you want to outline an element, like say you have a website and you have a sidebar, like we would make the page very light gray, so
Mm-hmm.
it would appear white, kind of like if you're not paying attention, it
Yep,
look like
yep.
a white web page, but it'd be very light gray. And then we might put a white, pure white box on the side to define the sidebar, and that way that's a secondary or tertiary contrast. You don't
Mm-hmm.
really like necessarily need it to tell what the information hierarchy is on the page, but it's kind of nice to like
Yeah.
as a graphical differentiator. We used to have a crappy display in our office because we were like, we didn't know, because as soon as you pulled an image over to that display, we're like, this is what most people see your design as, you know?
Yep.
And so we were designing on nice displays and then pulling it over to junky displays to go, okay, we're using this very subtle contrast to do this thing, but is it completely lost on monitors? Okay, we lost it here. We have to go back and punch up that contrast. We have to make that gray a touch darker
Yep.
to pull it up there. It was kind of, it's actually the exact opposite of what you were saying, where like we were designing for the lowest common denominator, but our displays were too good. Whereas you're like, okay, let's tone down those colors so that when you get it on that glossy display, it punches
Yeah,
above its weight,
exactly.
you know?
Interesting enough, what you brought up is not the first time I've heard of that. There are other photo studios that have, low, not good displays on site just to
Uh-huh.
review. But my thing is that from a photographer and also a video person, it's just like do it on the best display that you have so that you know it looks good and just let it go because you can't make accommodations for other display types out there, or you can't do that much of it because I mean, if your picture is going to show homogeneous colors, it's going to show homogeneous colors. Unlike like what you do in web design, where you can go in and redefine the elements a little bit more, add a little bit more contrast. It's a little bit different in nature, but still exactly the same thing we're talking about here.
Yeah. Is there I had breakfast with some friends today and a buddy asked me, I was telling him all about these monitors and kind of geeking out about it. And he said, because he's heard of these things just because when Apple releases something people just hear about it, and he said, so is Apple just not advertising these very well to creatives? And I thought, I feel like whenever like creatives just kind of know what Apple's doing. I don't know if they're advertising to us or not. We just kind of all know that this thing exists. But I am kind of curious. You are connected to a lot of photographers and people who are doing these color calibrations and that sort of thing. Is is the excitement for the do you feel that your excitement for this carries out to other industries? Like, do they see it too when they look at this display? Like, what is their feeling when you're talking to other people about this?
I think if you're in the creative or visual creative industry for photos, photos somewhat, I would say for videos for sure, because you can just master HDR content on there very easily. It can actually go up to like super bright, and it works out fairly well for what you need to do. I think that those two predominant industries are the one that I have a chance to interact with the most, and I feel like this is something that they are looking they're looking forward to using. Same thing with like I was telling you a story about my friend in the really big creative studio. He's a photographer there, and um, it was something that got him excited, right? So I think there are a lot of elements there, but again, it's one of those where Apple buried these in the manual for the operating system, like the technical guide for that,
Oh
and
yeah.
then also a white paper. They don't really talk about this much, if at all. It's listed almost passively on the spec page, and I really feel they should probably tailor it a little bit more of these towards the pro creative people. But then again, Apple is never really just for the pro; they're really more for the mass consumer. And if you happen to be a pro
Yeah.
using a product, then this is the byproduct that you get out of this, rather than we're just going to target the pro only and alienate a large swath of our customers who are just let's put it this way. I think majority of Apple customers are more affluent than other operating system, right? So some of them might just want to have an XDR display because it's the latest and greatest, and have it in their
Yes.
home when they're not even going to use any of these features. And I think
Yes.
Apple probably strike a good balance for consumer. I just feel like on the pro part they're kind of missing some elements. That's the reason why I'm kind of just like, here, let's do a guide, because I can provide a good, correct, more like thoughtful knowledge on how to go through these process.
Yeah, I was on Reddit the other day and I was just checking out what people were saying about this, and And Reddit's always fun because like
Hmm.
there's people over here who are really excited about something, and there's people over here who are really angry about something,
Yep,
or
yep.
angry at the people who because they're excited about something. It's wild. And
Yeah.
so like I'm reading through it, and I was like, man, like I was thinking about my time as a web designer, and back then we designed our office, and I was working with the co-owner of the agency, and like we had this cool space. It was like windows all around. We had the kind of end cap office of the building, so we had like three sides of
Hmm.
windows, cool space. And we're like, it was so much fun. I got to like help pick out the carpet and the desks and the chairs, and like we had this like black carpet, charcoal carpet with like white desks and red chairs. We were so proud of this space. We loved it. And then we went out, and this was like 10 years ago, kind of in this era when Apple wasn't really making displays anymore. Like they had just kind of discontinued kind
Hmm.
of their aluminum shell cinema display kind of
Hmm.
thing. And it killed us to design this office and then to just put like Dell monitors on all the desks. It's like this is your thing, and that's the piece that that I think gets lost in, especially in the tech space, is that people who become tech reviewers, oftentimes people like me, and I fall into this boat as well. It's like we get stuck in this mode of make computer go fast. Which computer goes faster, you know, and like that best computer,
Yep, yep,
and
yep.
we focus on those. Like, oh, this is a metric I can measure, so therefore this is better than that.
Yep.
Got it. And I could put that in a chart. I could make a graphic, and we're good.
Yeah.
But there's something
Guilty.
intangible about there's something intangible about these products where I boil it down to build quality, but
Hmm.
like this is the product we wanted on our desk, and we were willing to pay three hundred
Hmm.
dollars, $400 more
Yep.
for a display that was really like would just shine, because we had talked at the time about possibly even getting like IMAX, because
Hmm.
we thought that would at least fit the space, but
Oh
we're like,
yeah.
we're on client sites, we're going around, we need laptops, we can't do this, like we can't do IMAX, it doesn't make any sense. But it was that kind of discussion, like where all the other monitors we found were like, as monitors they looked good, but like the back of them was just plastic, you know, they just didn't
And they
look like
still all are.
ornamentation.
Beyond just
And they
maybe
still
Apple
all are.
and a few other one maybe two manufacturers, they're all still just plastic nowadays, and they're all plastic
Yeah,
put together. The spring mechanism, like I was demoing in the video, the Apple one, you can just use one finger and just push it up and down. You can't do that on the other ones. You have to just really grab the
right.
display and yank it up and down. That's because the element of design is not the same. It's not as smooth, and there's a thing about it. Like, as designers, as creative, we know that when we touch, we feel something, right? We built that connection,
Mm-hmm.
and if they make it that much nicer to hold in your hands, aesthetically pleasing, and also it attributes down to like the industrial design Apple has, which is actually bar none one of the best in the industry out there. I genuinely will say though that they did stray a little bit in the 2010 to 2020, but they kind of gone back
The
from,
keyboard era.
yeah, the keyboard era, like the
Yeah.
super thin, taking out all the ports, and now that they've given all these, essential elements back to the computer, it's much better for Creative Pro. I think they went over simplistic for a little bit, but now they're back, and they're great devices.
Yeah, I in my review. Well, actually, this video will be posted a few days after my review, so
Hmm.
now I can kind of give away some of the things I talk about in there. But I call the XDR kind of a luxury item. Is that like, yeah, you have the specs
Hmm.
that can back it up, so you can do the you can be the make computer go fast guy, like make the colors go shiny, like that would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
our version
yeah.
of it. But you also have that, like, it's a luxury item, and this felt like a throwback to that like Johnny Ive over
Hmm.
designed era, right?
Hmm.
Because you open that box. First of all, the outer box is cardboard. It's very boring, but there's a tab to open on the top, which forces you to open it the right way,
Yep.
which means you have to open it in a way where you see the handle, you see the box, the handle's that beautiful
Yep.
braided
Yep.
handle. Who
Yep.
makes a braided handle?
Yep.
And so you can lift it out of the
Yep.
box, and then there's two pull tabs on top, so you know exactly where it leads your eye right to those. You pull those, it forces you to open the box in a certain way, to pull out those sides to kind of
Yep.
lift it out.
Yep.
When I put the packaging back in the box and I lifted the box, I was like, this box is still heavy without the monitor in it.
Hmm.
Like it weighed almost as much as the monitor itself. And then on the back on the stand, I'm sure you saw this, there is a box around the stand
Yep.
with its own pull tab to
Yep.
take it off. The experience of pulling off that plastic sheath, it's not just clear plastic, it's like it's a piece of white paper
Yeah.
like
Yep.
gloss with XDR written
Yep.
on it, and
Yep.
you so satisfying. And I was like, this is like Apple. Like nobody does this,
It's quintessential
I've
Apple,
seen
and it's
good
one of the
packaging.
best. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
every single thing that they have done is actually better than any other manufacturers. Like the fact that I don't have to get a X-Acto blade out to like, or a box cutter out to open the box, that's a huge difference.
Uh-huh.
Where every other display that I've unpacked on my videos, even I'm like, here, let's take a knife out. We're gonna review this knife. I always joke about
Yeah.
that. We don't have to do that with Apple products.
Yeah, so one of the monitors I got into review. I won't tattle on the manufacturer because I
It's
actually
okay.
like the monitor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to badmouth it,
It's
but
okay.
one of them is a review unit, and so they like. Oftentimes when you get a review unit, you've probably experienced this, like you get it and it's brand new, it's in the packaging because
Mm-hmm.
they're just releasing
Yep.
it and they want it in your hands to test
Yep.
out on release day. But I asked for these like a year after they came out. So I'm getting a review unit that maybe has been in 3 or 4 hands before it got to me. So it is not new. It's so the box was like hastily packed by the last reviewer, and
Ouch.
I'm opening it up and it's been damaged, and it's not the product itself, but the box is like really ragged and
Uh
everything.
huh.
And I'm like, the experience could not have been more stark
Yeah.
between this Apple. The box is a piece of art with Apple, and
Yep.
this was beaten up and broken, and no
Yeah.
fault of the manufacturer there. It's just the way that review units work. But man, I was like, oh, like what a step down in quality, and it took me a good hour after getting the monitor unpacked before I was like, oh yeah, actually this is like, I was using it and I was actually working on a video edit, and I was like, no, this is pretty good. No, I like this, I don't have a problem with this. I don't think this is junk anymore.
Yeah. But it's that initial perception, right, that really changes the way how we feel about a product and everything. And it's something that's been rolled out. I mean, I'll just extend the example a little bit more. Like in the Apple Store, they have their display at very specific angles, like their MacBooks and everything, because they want you to go in and touch it and bring it down. Because they know that once you touch it, it kind of kindles that connection. It's like, I want one.
Yeah.
The term I use for a lot of products out there is like, you want to inspire desire. You want to inspire the user to buy. You want them to have that in their hand. And kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation a little bit, like you arrive when you get these display. It's the exact same feeling I was like trying, tell you here. It's that I think more display manufacturers, or just manufacturers out there in general that are not Apple, need to do more of that inspiring part. You're not inspiring your user to want to buy something, and yet you're wondering why your sales are down. Like, have you looked at yourself recently? You know?
Yeah, it's kind of like I just have an inexpensive HP mouse and keyboard here. This is my secondary setup just for streaming and whatnot, and it feels hollow inside. Like,
Yep.
and it's the weight is where the battery is.
Yep.
It totally works, but also it becomes completely invisible on my desk. It is purely functional. That is its
Yep.
only purpose. And then I have a phone, and my phone is 5 years old, yet oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
is so well weighted,
Yep.
and it's so like the edges are so clean, and the screen and the way it like when you unpack one of these things, and I think this is part of the reason why people love their phones, because Samsung is the closest I've seen to kind of emulating this
Yep.
experience where you open a Samsung phone or a
Mm-hmm.
Samsung tablet
Yeah.
and you're just like, oh, this is something special, because you're so used to touching boring things all day that are purely
Yeah.
functional, that as soon as you get something that's a piece of art that's been like manufactured to like just the way the buttons click on this thing, and they're like oh, they're like perfect. And like as soon as you get that, you're like, oh, you feel it and you
Yep.
remember it. And I have a phone that's like 4.5 years old, and yet I can still pull it out of its case and feel that.
Yep.
Like that's a miracle. And I use it 2 hours a day. Like I shouldn't feel special about it still, but I do. And there's just something magic about that so few companies can capture.
Absolutely.
It must be super hard.
I think it's hard to design good products that are simple enough to use in a way. So yeah, I think it is difficult. There's a lot of challenges I've gone through, but but again, it ends up in a really great product that we still admire it today, even though it may be an older product that you don't feel with some of the newer products on the market, at this point in time.
Yeah. I think for my review I also pulled out this. This is my
Oh,
2001.
hmm,
This is the second gen iPod. This wasn't the first gen iPod. That actually had a real wheel. This has a
yep,
capacitive
yep,
touch
yep.
wheel on it. And I was just pulling this. It's a thick boy. I forgot how thick these things were.
Back
But
then, though, it
still to
was
this
literally
day,
awesome.
oh, it still feels good.
Yep.
I don't have a charger that fits it anymore, but I might like go searching on the internet this weekend and find one because I want to see if it still works.
Yeah, you can still get a dock
We're
connector.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I'm sure they got to be on Amazon. Like somebody sells these things.
Amazon have it. I
What
think
are
Apple
those?
may
Like,
still sell them or like old stock from like Apple on Amazon or something. You can definitely get those.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, we're at about the 1 hour mark, and I just want to say thank you so much for having this conversation with me and sharing all this knowledge with me. I know it's going to make my reviews better, so for that, like a heartfelt thank you for you and your
Welcome.
time. And I think there's going to be a lot of people on my channel that absolutely love this and are going to like love digging into some of these details because there is something special about this display, and I don't think it has been covered as broadly as it really needs to because I think you need really specialized knowledge to really appreciate it. So, Art,
Hmm.
thank you so much. I'm going to link your stuff all down below and I'll mention it at the top of the video too before it goes live so everybody can find you on YouTube.
Appreciate
And
that.
yeah, thanks so much.